I'll start with a quick recap from the National Jobs Report for January 2022. With the addition of 467,000 jobs in January, the US has recovered 87% of the jobs that were lost during the pandemic recession. And several industries have fully recovered at the national level. Those include retail trade, transportation and warehousing, information, financial activities, and professional and business services. The national unemployment rate was 4% in January. And in the last months of 2021, as well as in January 2022, the US had more job openings than unemployed workers. We'll get our first official report of Oregon's unemployment situation in 2022 when the January numbers are released on Tuesday, March 8th. Oregon closed out 2021 on similar terms to the US. Several sectors of the economy had fully recovered their recession job losses here as well. For us, those include construction, wholesale trade, information, and professional and business services. Oregon's unemployment rate was 4.1% in December. Oregon's labor force was bigger at the end of 2021 than before the pandemic. And Oregon also had more job openings than unemployed workers between October and December. I'm often asked the question, where did the workers go? At this point, they've largely gone back to work. While there's still some workers with barriers getting back to jobs, Oregon added 107,000 jobs in 2021, and unemployment rates are nearing record lows again. Job openings have reached record highs in recent months, with private employers reporting 107,000 vacancies in the summer of 2021 and nearly 103,000 at any given time between October and December. With the number of unemployed workers in December not far above the pre-pandemic level, there just aren't enough available workers for this incredibly high level of job openings. With that, I'll turn it over to Acting Director David Gerstenfeld for more updates. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. I wanted to start off with some good news. As we shared in a prior news release, our paid family medical leave insurance leadership team is now complete. Our new policy manager and operations managers have already started, and our new outreach manager will join us in March. The new leadership team is working with equity and inclusion consultants, Subduction, to identify current organizational dynamics and assess the program's collective understanding of equity concepts. The Coltons are providing executive coaching, leadership team strategy sessions, as well as tailored equity training. In March, the Paid Family Medical Leave Insurance Program will be hosting public hearings on the rules regarding how we will define wages, such as overtime or tips, to calculate benefit amounts. We're also taking feedback on the rules addressing employers' equivalent paid leave plans and what benefits those plans need to offer in order to be considered equivalent plans. There's more information about the proposed rules and on how people can provide feedback on our website, oregon.gov/employee, on the administrative rules page. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about one of the tools that we use to prevent unemployment insurance fraud due to identity theft. When the pandemic struck, the Oregon Employment Department, along with other states across the nation, faced a barrage of fraud attempts from national and international crime rings trying to steal benefits from the unemployment insurance system. Some of these criminal networks used people's personal identifying information that they had stolen or had purchased on the black market, to try to fraudulently obtain unemployment insurance benefits. Their attacks threatened and continue to threaten the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund that contains the money used to pay unemployment insurance benefits. These attacks also delayed providing benefits to the ID theft victims who were legitimately seeking unemployment benefits. When somebody applies for unemployment insurance, we need to ensure that it is someone legitimately eligible for them and that it is not somebody using a stolen identity. There is not a nationally provided system that adequately does this, and only a limited number of third parties offer these types of services. The Oregon Employment Department, like many other states, contracted with IDME for this service. How this identity verification process works is that after applying for benefits, claimants receive a notification requesting that they verify their identity with ID.me. At the ID.me website, the claimant verifies their identity by taking a photo of themselves and uploading their driver's license, state ID, passport, or passport card. ID.me then compares the photo to the uploaded document to verify their identity. This is called a one-to-one verification. Equity and inclusion are core principles at the Oregon Employment Department, and we're aware of concerns about facial recognition technology and how it may be harder for people of color to use. We're also deeply committed to ensuring that the claimant identity verification process is simple for everyone. That's why last fall, we chose to pause using ID.me for a short time to look at how it was impacting people seeking benefits by reviewing a month's worth of claims to determine if there were disparate impacts, and if so, for what segments of the population. We reached out to people who didn't complete the identity verification process to ask them why. We learned that the segments of our population having the most difficulty with ID.me were people aged 20 and under, Spanish speakers, African Americans, and American Indian or Alaska Natives seeking benefits. Based on what we learned, we made several improvements to ensure the ID.me verification process is easier to complete, and we offered additional support for people who may need some extra help. Some of the improvements include updating our phone recordings to add a new message to make sure people are aware of the department's work with ID.me, and making these recordings available in English, Spanish, Russian, and Vietnamese. Conducting proactive phone dialer campaigns in English and Spanish so people get a call reminding them to verify their identity with ID.me after they file their initial claim, and again after they claim benefits for their first week. We're making live calls to people from our own agency employees who speak the customer's preferred language, or using an interpreter to communicate if their language is something other than English or Spanish. We added a help with ID.me option to our Contact Us form. We also have been working closely with our WorkSource Oregon partners so people can go to their local WorkSource center to get help verifying their identity with ID.me. We have a recent pilot program helping customers use special cell phones provided at the WorkSource Oregon centers to verify their identity in case they don't have a personal cell phone with a camera. And finally, employees at WorkSource Oregon centers are able to verify the identity of people who are having difficulty or who have privacy concerns with using ID.me. We've been working hard and will continue to work hard to ensure that people can quickly and easily access their benefits, but that identity thieves cannot. Coming out of the pandemic, we continue making improvements to customer service, and we are well on track to be a more inclusive agency that provides services to all Oregonians and employers in a simple and clear manner. I want to thank all of our employees for their efforts that have brought us so far to the point that we're at today. And with that, I believe that Gail and I are happy to try to answer any questions.
So this is where we open the lines to members of the media to ask questions. We will call on you in the order that you RSVP'd. Please limit yourself to one question and one follow-up question. Make sure you state to whom you are directing your question. If you are joining us by phone, please make sure to hit *6 to unmute yourself. And if you run into any questions or if you don't get your question answered, we are always happy to help you in the communications office here at OED at OED_communications@oregon.gov. And the first question today is from Peter Wong with Pamplin Media.
Hi, good afternoon. For Gail, I believe at last week's economic and revenue forecast presentation, Josh Lehner said that they are now projecting that Oregon will reach its pre-pandemic employment levels fall instead of summer. Does that track with the data you have? I realize your report, your next report isn't due until next week, so. Anyway.
Hi, Peter. Your audio was a little bit faint, but I think I heard the question. Tell me if I got this wrong. You were talking about the Oregon Office of Economic Analysis. Last week, they had a revenue forecast. As a part of that, they said that they anticipate Oregon will return to its February 2020 employment level by the end of 2022. And you're wondering if that tracks with the employment department.
Yes.
Okay, good. So as of December 2021, Oregon had about 54,000 fewer non-farm payroll jobs than it did in February of 2020. So in order to fill that gap, we would have to see 54,000 jobs added by the end of the year. So I just mentioned that Oregon added 107,000 jobs in 2021. And that was by far the most we've ever added in a calendar year. Prior to that, the largest number of jobs that had been added in a calendar year was 61,000. So 54,000 is possible. I think that they have done a great job with their forecasting on the employment side, and we work really closely together. And I can't speak for them on that, but I will say that we have added that many jobs before. I know there's certainly enough help wanted signs out there to add a lot of jobs in 2022 as well.
Okay, thank you. For David, you've given a detailed explanation of ID.me and facial recognition. In light of what Senator Wyden and others have raised about facial recognition, are you satisfied that this information is being used for the legitimate purposes you intend and not some other purpose?
Peter, that's a good question. And we share with Senator Wyden the strong belief, and I think I've talked about it a lot before in these briefings, of ensuring that we have equitable access, that we're really doing everything we can to protect everybody seeking benefits. We agree with Senator Wyden that an ideal solution would be a nationally provided identity verification tool. We need to have something. We've looked at the contract that we have with ID.me to ensure that there are privacy safeguards. As I mentioned, we instituted a number of additional provisions to make sure that people can easily verify their identity to show that they are the real person who's accessing their benefits in Oregon. So we continue to look at that, and we continue to see how we can make the process to verify their identity even easier and preserve their confidentiality. So we do think that there are good safeguards in place. We would prefer that it was a national system that all states could use, but there isn't one right now that provides the same level of identity verification security.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, up next is Mike Rogoway with the Oregonian.
Hey, David, again on ID.me, you talked about the steps you took with your pause to review things. Are you satisfied that the barriers that you identified during that pause have been overcome, or are there still some that people are encountering as a result of the system?
So we did our best to identify what those barriers were. What we looked at, we were able to see where it looked like certain groups of people were having more challenges using the system. And there have been some other challenges that I think were pretty universally felt. For instance, well, the employment department has made huge progress with answering the phone, and we continue to answer actually over 95% of our calls within 5 minutes and have been for quite a while now. We were hearing reports from our customers that people needing to get additional assistance through ID.me were having to wait too long on hold. And that's one of the reasons that we're expanding the ability of our employees to help them and to do that manual identity verification ourselves when needed. So we're certainly not saying that we're at a perfect state. We continue to work with the vendor and to address the concerns, and frankly, to try to understand what the impacts were that we saw. We know when somebody didn't complete the ID.me process, for some people that reflects that there was a barrier and that there was something that was more challenging. And I think we've taken good steps to give options for people who face those barriers, whether it's a concern about privacy or something else. Some of the people that don't complete the process, for instance, they're the people that shouldn't complete the process. It's the people that were using stolen identities to try to file claims. So it's hard to parse out which of the people that didn't complete were people that were facing barriers, which is why we really did a lot of that outreach. I think that we have done a good job. We're continuing to look at this because it is an important issue for us.
And is there an option if I file a claim and they ask for ID.me verification, is there an option, even if it's more laborious on my end, to pursue an alternative? Or is ID.me, for the people who are selected for that, is that your only route? Like, could I go into a WorkSource office, for example, as an alternative and say, it's me, look?
In Oregon, we do have that second option that you just described. So that's one of the measures that we've taken to provide alternatives. So if you're selected for ID.me, many people go through that process and they complete it pretty smoothly without any challenges. For people that do either have those privacy concerns or don't have the technology needed to do it, or are just having challenges, they can go into a WorkSource center. And depending on the issue, either our employees can help them get through the ID.me process, or our employees can verify their identity themselves and make sure that they can get their benefits.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Next is Kate Davidson with OPB.
Hi, David. Some more questions on the same subject. I just want to make sure I understand the parameters with ID.me. Is it something that you've used, like when did you start using it? Have you used it throughout the pandemic? And I understand it's still in use. And then for which claims? Was it claims only where fraud was suspected, or a random assortment of people who would be asked to verify their identities?
Sure. So we have not been using ID.me throughout all of the pandemic. One of the things that spurred this use, Oregon has had a number of fraud prevention tools in place that work well. With the onset of the pandemic and really the huge increase in those sophisticated criminal rings, including the creation of the PUA program, nationally, there was just a massive spike in these attacks, and it was clear that the existing tools didn't provide adequate protection. And frankly, that's what led to some of the large numbers that have been reported of ID theft benefits being stolen from some states. We initially started using ID.me in March of 2021, and we eased into it, doing it in a pilot and then gradually expanding it, initially focusing on the PUA program and on claims that already had some indicators that there might be something wrong with the claim, that it might be an identity theft issue. We have expanded that. In the late fall of 2021, we started using ID.me for all new claims being filed. We did that, and for the first month of doing that is that month snapshot that we looked at to see the impact once we were having all new claims go through that. And there was a pause while we looked at the information, and currently almost all new claims are required to do that identity verification process, initially referred to ID.me. And then if they have particular challenges, we've talked about some of the additional supports and resources that the Employment Department has made available.
Okay, thank you for that. And I mean, do you have any sense of how many people were asked to use the service and how many were rejected because of the, whatever answer came back about their ID verification?
Right. Well, we have some data, but again, we can say how many people we referred or how many claims we referred, and we can tell how many people successfully completed it and a little bit more information. So from when we first started using the system through the end of January of this year, it was about 27,000 claims that were referred to ID.me. Of those, about 17,000 successfully completed the identity verification through ID.me. There's a couple of important points, though. I mentioned that we are verifying people's identity at the WorkSource centers if people have challenges or concerns. So those are in addition to the 17,000. So the 17,000 are people that verified through ID.me. We don't have an automated way to track the people that were doing that verification in the WorkSource centers. And then we do know that of the people that didn't complete, some of them didn't start the ID.me verification process. And of course, probably a disproportionate number of those are the claims that ID.me is designed to stop. So they were fraudulent claims. They were asked to verify their identity because it was identity thieves that were doing it. They didn't do that process. There were also about a little over 7,000 people who started to go through the ID.me process and did not successfully complete it. And then another just under 2,000 who started the process but didn't complete the process. So there were some people that actually were unsuccessful and some that started but didn't complete the ID.me process.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Kate. Our last person to ask questions is Lindsay Nadrich with Coin.
Hey, David. I have a question about the number of people who are overpaid, and I'm wondering what happens if someone qualifies for the overpayment waiver, but they already started paying back the overpayment. Will they get reimbursed? I spoke to a man who was told he was overpaid by $300, already paid it back in October of 2021, and is still waiting for his money to be returned. So how would that work?
It's a good question, Lindsay, and I can't give you one simple answer because there are a number of different federal programs and state programs that people were paid under. And there were some laws that were changed at the state level during the course of the pandemic and different federal guidance for different times. So as a general rule, this isn't universal, but for most situations, if somebody had already repaid part of an overpayment and we later determined that they were eligible for a waiver, we are able to basically return to them the repayment that they had already made. That's not universally true, but particularly for the federal programs, that's generally how they were. So for instance, if the situation that you're talking about was someone with a lost wages assistance, if it was a $300 payment, then generally if we ultimately determine that we're waiving the overpayment and they had already given us a check for $300, we would be able to return that payment to them.
Any idea how long it would take to sort through that? And then also, what's the deadline people have to apply for that waiver?
Well, we encourage people to apply as quickly as possible, particularly with some of the changes in state laws. I shared recently that we were giving notice to people about that waiver opportunity, and we want people to respond as soon as possible so we can get those processed. We have been working to process those waiver requests as quickly as possible, and we're making really good progress. So by the end of this month, we should be processing the waiver requests that we receive within 10 days. We're quickly getting to that point this month. So we've been reviewing a lot of those waiver requests and making really good progress.
And lastly, if I could, sorry, why do people have to apply for the waiver? Why isn't there a way to go through the system and see, like, this person was overpaid, they qualify? Why isn't it automatic?
A lot of that is around the federal requirements. Most people that have an overpayment, even if it was the state program, there was also a federal payment that went along with it during most of the pandemic period. And there are multiple requirements. So to be eligible for a waiver, not only were there certain, we have to make sure that the overpayment wasn't caused by fraud. So we have to make sure that the cause of the overpayment is one that makes the person eligible for a waiver. But there are also other standards. So there's a state standard about showing that it would be against equity and good conscience to not waive the overpayment. And at the federal level, depending on the program, there are some different requirements that have to be met. And the federal programs do explicitly require a waiver application. So we did just get a little bit more flexibility with some recent federal guidance on the waivers, but it still requires generally a waiver application to show that the person is eligible.